campaign? What are the Lib Dems doing to campaign for proportional representation? And one thing I've noticed on the programme over the last year is that more and more people seem to be interested in that subject, which, I mean, I always find it a complete turn-off, I have to say, and I can't imagine that you win many votes on it. However, I would be lying if I said that there wasn't an increased level of interest in it. Now, given that the next election result is, I would say at the moment, is either going to be a Labour majority or a hung parliament with Labour with the majority party, will you make that a condition to go into any sort of pact or coalition with Labour, that they would have to bring in some form of proportional representation with or without a referendum?
Well, for this set of local elections, what we're doing is setting out a fair deal, and we're highlighting some of the policies we have around tackling the problems with the economy and with the NHS, and the fact that the government keeps allowing water companies to pump sewage into the river. But when it comes to the next general election, our commitment to proportional representation will be in our manifesto. I personally hope it will be on the front page of our manifesto. It's been in our manifesto in every single election for as long as I can remember, and it's very clearly an important policy for our party. It's not the only important policy for our party, but it is an important one.
And which form of proportional representation? Because there's about 1 million of them, aren't there?
There are, and I've been on your show before where I think I said to you, if you put 5 Lib Dems in a room, you get 6 different ideas on the best form of PR.
Or even a phone box.
Even a phone box, that's it. But having quite a big phone box. But yeah, I take the point. There's so many different ideas. The party is committed to the single transferable vote model. That's what we've said before. But as I say, I think any form of PR is better than the system we have at the moment.
Let's go to calls. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask Daisy Cooper a question. If you just tuned in, she's Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats. Justin is in Marlborough. Hello, Justin.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Daisy.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to ask, after the giddy heights of Nick Clegg, when you're most popular as a party, you kind of reached your zenith at that point. And it's been a kind of trickle down from that point, from what I can see, for identity on the platform of the Lib Dems and who they are. And I would ask, do you think it has anything to do with your leader, who, by the way, I think is a lovely man and a great human being, but I'm just not sure he's dynamic enough to pick up the people out there that want to vote for your party, with the mishmash of the polarisation of Labour and the Conservatives. And I just can't help thinking we should discuss a new leader. What do you think, Daisy?
I wonder what Daisy thinks about that.
Well, Justin, thank you for your question. I mean, let's be blunt. In 2015, it wasn't a trickle down. It was a bit of a thump down to earth, and we've been building back ever since. And of course, you will know in the last couple of years that we obviously have won 3 stunning by-elections, in no small part down to Ed Daveys' personal leadership. In all 3 cases, he was the first party leader on the ground. He was campaigning alongside our candidates. And I think what Ed and the Liberal Democrats have shown in Parliament is that we are really out there winning the battle of ideas and actually leading some of the key policies in this country. Some people may not know that we were the very first party to call for a windfall tax. We called for it before Labour did, and certainly months before the Conservatives did. And if they'd listened to us at the time, it could have been a much bigger windfall tax that would have brought in more money, that would have actually given more support to ordinary people. And again, last autumn, Ed Davey was the first party leader to call for the energy price hike to be scrapped as well. So as far as I'm concerned, Ed has been out there on the front foot, providing fantastic leadership for the party and for the country.
But he is a bit like Keir Starmer, isn't he? A bit charismatically challenged. And if you're going to fight an election campaign, you kind of want a leader rallying the troops. And I think when Layla Moran fought in for the leadership, I think a lot of people thought, well, it was a choice between a sort of slightly risky, charismatic maverick and somebody who's solid but a little dull. Now, they're my words, not yours. But he hasn't quite got the oomph, has he?
Do you know what? Ed is actually he's a really, really fun guy. He is a real grafter. He thinks about the big issues facing the country. And I think if you think about what we need at the moment as a country. We need somebody who knows how to run the economy. We need somebody who knows how to tackle the climate crisis, and somebody who's got experience. And as a former climate minister, Ed has, and a trained economist, Ed has all of that. So people will make up their own minds as to what personality traits they want to see in leaders. Of course, there are different forms of leadership, but I think that Ed has done a fantastic job, and I hope that he and the Liberal Democrats as a whole can demonstrate to the public that we are worth voting for on the 4th of May next week, and again at the general election when it comes.
You'd like to be leader, wouldn't you, one day?
One day, maybe, but certainly that's not anything I'm thinking about right now. I really enjoy my role as deputy leader. I'm learning a huge amount from working alongside Ed. I think we make a pretty good team, if I may say so myself, and so long may that continue.
Right, let's go to a text question here from Chris in Brecon, who says, I'm a centrist, shy Tory wet, whatever term people like to use. I voted Tory since 2010. Today, I feel totally lost politically. I don't recognise this current Conservative government as Conservative. I'm not overly impressed with Labour, and the Lib Dems, you haven't won my vote, but I'll tactically vote at the next general election to remove my Tory MP, as the bill getting passed today has made me feel absolutely ashamed to be British. Well, that's more of a comment than a question, isn't it? Let's go to another one. Will in Mid-Devon says, I wanted to ask Daisy whether the Liberal Democrats back UK farmers, as their policy across the country has been varied. Agriculture is a key component of the rural economy, and as such, important for rural voters in Tory seats that you're trying to win. So will the Liberal Democrats back British farmers, or would they prefer to back the militant vegans who seek to destroy us?
So, thank you for the question, Will. I'm a Suffolk girl, born and bred, so I've grown up in a farming area, and I am very pro-UK farmers, unlike this Conservative government, I hasten to add. The fact is that our farmers in this country play an extraordinarily important role. They are not only custodians of the land, but they are producers of food. And in this country, I don't believe we have the level of food security that we need. I think many farmers feel as though they've been really sold out by some of the trade deals that have been done by the government, particularly the trade deals with Australia and New Zealand. I think even the former Defra Minister himself said that these were rubbish deals once he stepped down from power. I think that in terms of getting to net zero and carbon emissions, clearly worldwide we need to reduce the amount of meat that we eat. But what I would say is that one of the ways we can reduce the amount of meat that we eat is by eating, when we do eat meat, to eat it from British farmers, because our welfare standards are high, our environmental standards are high, the emissions are far lower from meat that is reared in this country than in many other countries from around the world. And I would like to see this government take our UK farmers much more seriously.
If you're encouraging people to eat less meat, that means that farmers like Will are going to lose money.
No, it doesn't. What it means is that people should choose, when they do eat meat, they should eat meat from UK farmers.
It's more expensive, cost of living crisis. Not everyone can do that.
Well, this is why we do need to see a lot more support for our UK farmers, because there is a real issue about food security in this country. When we continue to import cheap meat from around the world, it is from poorer standards. It is often very, very bad for the climate as well, because the emissions are far higher, not just because of the forests that are cut down in order to rear beef in some parts, particularly in South America. So I am very, very in favour of UK farmers. I recently hosted the East Anglian branch of the National Farmers Union in Parliament. They raised a number of questions with me about the access to water for agriculture, about the delays in getting potato seeds, for example, over here, in terms of access to labour so that food doesn't rot in our fields. These are all issues that the Liberal Democrats have been raising for a very long time now, and increasingly I think what Will and hopefully others will find is that farmers across the country, in North Shropshire and in Tiverton and Honiton, where we won those 2 by-elections, are turning to the Liberal Democrats because we really do understand their concerns.
OK, we'll come to more of your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put a call through to Daisy Cooper. It is 18 minutes past 7 on LBC.
LBC.
21 minutes past 7 on LBC. Hope you're watching us on Global Player. I always want to call you Daisy Sampson, that's a maiden name of Daisy McAndrew.
Oh.
Do you remember? She was Charles Kennedy's press secretary, and I've always got her name in my... Well, so apologies, I've done it.
Right.
Anyway, I've got it out of my system now. Daisy Cooper is Liberal Democrat Deputy Leader and MP for St Albans. Referring to our discussion on Ed Daveys, Sandra has texted to say, my son just said, Ed who? And sadly, I couldn't answer. That's the problem. I want to hear more from the Liberals and more about their policies. Well, that's what we're here for you today, Sandra. Let's go to Kevin in Dagenham. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Ian. But Daisy, listen, we know you're going to do really well in the by-elections and all that. You normally always do. But obviously you might not get a majority. But who would you actually merge with? Would you merge with the Conservatives or Labour? Because I'm obviously Dagenham, and we've got a great geezer, John Cruddas. Seriously, he is all right. But I would never, ever vote for that Keir Starmer. But...
well, if you vote for John Cruddas, you're voting for Keir Starmer, aren't you?
No. Honestly, Mr. Cruddas is a different breed. Honestly, him and John McDowell, I say, he don't come from our borough, but they're different people. They're Labour sort of people. But Tories have never done me no problem, even though they've been all right as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so your question is, which party would the Liberal Democrats go into coalition with, if any?
Well, both Ed Davey and I have said very clearly that we will not be doing a deal with the Conservative Party. I think, as other listeners of yours have said, the Conservative Party at the moment are so unrecognisable from anything that even lifelong Conservative voters recognise, that we have completely and utterly ruled that out. But in terms of any other options, I mean, really, we're not thinking about that at all right now, because what we're saying is, when I go out and knock on doors, people want to talk to me about the cost of living crisis.
He wants to talk to you about going into coalition.
He does, and I understand that that's a legitimate question, but also when I come on these shows, I'm here to talk about Liberal Democrats, I'm here to talk about my party, I'm here to talk about, what about the things that we're standing for. And I hope very much that Kevin and other people will recognise that at the next election, Liberal Democrats will be standing candidates in as many seats as possible, I hope every single seat, and we'll be campaigning on our own manifesto, and we'll be campaigning for every single vote in every single seat.
I mean, that goes without saying, but the fact of the matter is, I think people who saw you go into coalition with the Conservatives last time, whatever they thought of it, whether they approved it or they didn't, they are going to want to know, and you've kind of hinted that you would... well, have you hinted this? I mean, you said you're not going to go into coalition with the Conservatives. That is, I think we all understand the reasons for that. But they are going to want to know what the conditions might be for a deal with Labour, unless you rule that out as well. And if you do rule it out, what's the point of voting Liberal Democrat?
Well, we've got probably somewhere between 12 and 18 months before the next general election. We are focused as a party on campaigning to win Liberal Democrat votes in every part of the country, especially in those blue wall areas where we're the key challengers to the Conservatives. And I recognise that Kevin and other people like Kevin will want to know what may or may not happen, after the next general election. But the fact of the matter is, not a single vote has been cast yet. A huge amount could change in the next 18 months. And I just don't think I'm able to speculate on that. The fact of the matter is, we are in a cost of living crisis. Our NHS has been driven into the ground. And I am completely, utterly, 100% laser-like focused on coming up with those ideas that will win us votes at the next general election.
Final go on behalf of Kevin.
Sure.
In some other countries that have systems of proportional representation, you have the various parties say in advance of an election which party they are most likely to do a deal with, or sometimes they do it in advance of the election. Not always, but sometimes. Do you see that as any remote possibility?
No, because as you say, that happens in countries that has a fairer voting system. And one of the reasons why the Liberal Democrats are so keen to have a fairer voting system in this country is because under first past the post, we're constantly attacking the opposite parties, saying we are completely different, don't vote for them, they're terrible, vote for us, we're great. And actually under a fairer voting system, you can be more collaborative and you can highlight areas where you actually have things in common. I would much prefer it if we had that system here in this country. But until we have PR, I don't think we were remotely going to get to that position.
Kevin, thank you. Let's go to David in St Albans. Now, he's either going to be a real enemy of yours or a massive fan, I suspect.
We'll find out.
David, what would you like to ask Daisy?
I'm a massive fan, so you can put the one to bed about being anti.
Okay. All right,
what
go on with it.
I'd like
I've not paid him
Daisy to, with the help of all the Liberal MPs they've got, to actually be an honest politician now and actually say what the mess this country's in and what we're going to do to get out of it, rather than all the old ploys of we'll do this, we'll do that. I'm 69, I would like to see now honest politicians telling us the truth and not giving us what-not promises. And I think that the Liberals, they're in a position now, not many MPs, but they've got a lot of votes for proportional representation. And I think there's a lot of people like me that would like to be told the truth rather than election, buccaneering.
Do you not think that Daisy's telling you the truth?
I think she is. But I would like them to fight the elections with the truth in black and white. Like, if the government was a company on the stock market, Deloitte and Touche should have been bought in by now. Do you know what I mean? It's not functional. We're slapping everybody down. We want the honest truth.
I'm slightly at a loss to understand your point, because the Labour Party under Keir Starmer and the Lib Dems under Ed Daveys spend all day, every day, pointing out the failures of this government. What else do you want them to do?
I would like them to say how to get round it without trying to win votes, but by being honest.
Okay.
I think everybody in this country...
It is all about winning votes, though. I mean, David, with respect, that's quite naive, isn't it, Daisy, to say, well, you've got to be honest without trying to win votes. You can't get elected unless you win votes.
I think David is making a broader point, which is a lot of people right now are incredibly frustrated at the state of the country. And I think people think that the state of the country is so bad, they really don't know whether anybody has a solid plan as to how we're going to get out of this mess. So if I understand David correctly, if not, I'm sure he'll send me an email after the show, but if I understand him correctly, he wants politicians to be honest about how bad things are and to be honest about what our plans are for fixing things. Now, I hope very much that I think I have a reputation in St Albans for saying what I think, and people often stop me and say I don't always agree with you, but at least you'll tell me what your views are. And I hope very much that our party can do that at the next election. We have continued as a Lib Dem party to put forward ideas on how to tackle the cost of living, on how to help our NHS services. And every time we do that, we try and develop a concrete plan. We try and be honest about how much we think it's going to cost and where we might get the funding from. But I think what David's talking about is that, he's thrown down the gauntlet. I think everybody right now thinks that we have an unholy mess in this country. The Conservatives really, really have, blown a hole in the nation's finances. They've flatlined the economy. They've driven our health services into the ground. And people are wanting to know, what is our plan for getting out of that mess? And I hope that Lib Dems will continue to set out our plans on each of those issues.
Right, two related questions here on on two texts. Would the Lib Dems have another EU referendum? And secondly, from somebody different, as a passionate European, why should I rejoin the Liberal Democrats?
Well, the Liberal Democrats are the most pro-European UK-wide party. We believe that the UK would be best served being at the heart of Europe. And again, I think I've been on one of your shows before when I've actually sort of set out our plan. We are the only party, the major party in Westminster, that has a 4-point plan as to how we would put the UK back in the heart of Europe. That starts by fixing...
But not in the EU.
Well, it starts by fixing the current deal that we have, which isn't working. And then it's joining various programmes that we could join, whether that's Erasmus or Horizon or other things like that. And those are two things we could do very, very quickly. These are things the government could do today if they wanted to do them. But then there are sort of stages 3 and 4, which will take a little bit longer. Stage 3 is improving the trade deals we have with other countries. I mentioned before how some of them are really failing our UK farmers. But the 4th stage is rejoining the single market, perhaps single market and customs union. That is our party policy. We've passed that in a democratic way internally with our party members. Every opportunity I'm asked, I'm happy to set out what those plans are.
Why not be honest and say, look, I believe that Britain would be better off within the EU? Because that's what you do believe, isn't it?
It's what I believe, but our party policy is to have this 4-stage plan, which will end up with us joining the single market. And the reason why I think this 4-stage plan is so important is because
Haven't we
take
got in
the country with
brackets
us.
stage 5, rejoin the EU fully? But you can't say that at the moment for electoral reasons.
I think what's really important is we all know that since the last referendum, there's been a huge amount of division, both in our country, in our communities, and indeed even in individual families. And I think the one thing that I would want to see is if we develop that closer relationship with Europe, we have got to take the British public with us. But what I've also said is that if one day we want to build this stronger relationship with the EU, we have got to do it from a position of strength. We have got to have a strong economy so that we can get the best deal possible when we're building a better relationship with the EU. And at the moment, we simply don't have a strong economy, and we've got to make sure that we build our own economy, we become a much stronger country so that we have a really strong position from which to negotiate a good relationship.
Breaking news, MPs have just voted in favour of the illegal migration bill by a majority of 59. It'll now be debated by the House of Lords. We're going to be talking about that obliquely after 9 o'clock with Suella Braverman's, shall we say, incendiary comments on Nick Ferrari's programme this morning. We'll hear more from Daisy Cooper in a moment. The lines are still open for your calls, 0345 6060 973. Stephen Colchester says, OK, if we rejoin the EU, I will vote Lib Dem again. There you are. It's a vote you're missing out on, Daisy. It's 7:32. Amelia Cox has the news headlines.
The government's illegal migration bill, which seeks to stop small boat crossings in the English Channel, has passed the Commons. MPs voted in favour of the legislation with a majority of 59, and it now moves to the House of Lords. 7 men and 3 women have been arrested on suspicion of murder over the death of a man in West London. Police were called to reports of intruders at an address in Brentford. And Rishi Sunak insists the UK will continue to help end the bloodshed in Sudan as he aims to hit 8 evacuation flights by the end of today. The UK has so far taken 300 people from the violence, with the first plane landing at Stansted earlier. LBC weather: dry with clear spells for the far north of Scotland and parts of central and eastern England tonight. A few spells of rain in West Scotland and Northern Ireland, a low of -1.
This is LBC.
Tactics. Daisy Cooper, the Deputy Leader of the Lib Dems, is with us taking your calls. Let's go to Eric, who's in Enfield. Hello, Eric.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Daisy. How are you both?
Hi, very well. What would you like to ask?
I want to ask a $1 million question, really, if I may. So I used to be a Labour supporter and a member, which I cancelled about a month ago, all because of Sadiq Khan's ULEZ belt tax. Now, I want to ask Daisy, because I don't hear the Liberal Democrats talking much about it, what does she think, and her party, about this unfair ULEZ scheme which is coming in the name of fresh air, which is a whole load of lies?
Thank you for your question, Eric. You're not too far from me, where I am in St Albans. So first of all, I think all of us would like to have live in an environment that has clean air, but I agree with you that the ULEZ scheme has been rolled out in the wrong way and at the wrong time. And Liberal Democrats have been particularly vocal in London, but also where I am, around the outskirts of London as well, about some of the challenges. So, even before the ULEZ scheme was rolled out, Liberal Democrats in London were calling on Sadiq Khan to use the most up-to-date technology, which could actually measure how far people were driving and how polluting their vehicle was. And what I find deeply frustrating is that one of my constituents in St Albans, if they have to drive into just inside the ULEZ zone, just say by a few metres, just to maybe for work or for caring responsibilities, they have to pay exactly the same fee as somebody who can drive into the ULEZ zone and drive around for hours on the inside. And that just seems to me to be completely absurd. So Liberal Democrats have said that if you want to roll out this kind of scheme, and we'd like to see a scheme that works, you'd need to have a very generous scrappage scheme so that people are actually incentivised to swap out their polluting car to get a cleaner car. And for those who don't have a car, you need, for those who maybe can't afford that, you need to have really good public transport options as an alternative. And I think in parts of London, particularly on the outskirts, where you don't have either of those options, it's just incredibly punitive, particularly in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Eric?
Well, I'm sort of convinced what I heard. If I can just say this on radio, because this is very important. A friend's neighbour has a non-ULEZ compliant car, which is even now, and the husband was ill. Because she didn't want to give the £12.50 a day, she actually didn't take her husband to hospital. He wasn't feeling unwell, and unfortunately he passed away. He passed away because of this ULEZ scheme. And I'm telling you, there's going to be loads more people like that. He's expecting people to get on the bus midnight to go to hospitals or whatever. He's out of order. Yes, okay, we need clean air. For example, I mean, I'm no stranger to LBC. I'm a plumber.
Eric, I'm going to stop you there. We have limited time, and I think you've had a good bash at it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Text here, what are the Lib Dems doing to woo the right-wing commentator Iain Dale's vote?
Well, I've turned up to the show to start with, so hopefully that will help. The fact of the matter is, Liberal Democrats at the moment are setting out our stall. We're calling for people to have a fair deal, because I think many people feel as though the deal they're getting under this government is not fair. What we are seeing right across the country is that lifelong Conservative voters don't recognise this Conservative government. They're appalled by the mini budget and the scandals and everything else and the incompetence. And so hopefully many of them will be drawn to us because of our values in many parts of the country, first of all, on the 4th of May.
You're going to have to do better than wag on about a fair deal, I'm afraid, but I appreciate the sentiment. Right, let me just tell you who's on Cross Question at 8 o'clock, because I haven't done that yet. We have Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis, Jackie Smith, chair of 2 NHS trusts, as if one wasn't enough, former Home Secretary, and of course my co-host on the For the Many podcast, Alistair Carmichael, Liberal Democrat Home Affairs, Northern Ireland and Justice spokesperson, he's a busy boy at the moment, and MP for Orkney and Shetland, and Jimmy McLaughlin, former advisor on business and technology to Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, and host of the podcast Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, which you can subscribe to on Global Player. Lines are open for that as well now, 0345 6060 973. Right, let's go to Peter in Kensington. Hi, Peter.
Hello. I've got a question for Daisy about private schools. Can you tell me what your views are on the charitable status of private schools? I've taught in both sectors, currently teaching in a private school, and I'm just wondering what the Liberal Democrats' views are on private schools.
Sure. Well, in St Albans and around the country, we have lots of incredibly good state schools, and we have lots of good private schools. And I know that many private schools are already very active in terms of sharing their resources, whether that's sports facilities or libraries or other resources with state schools. And I certainly do think there's a role for private schools to do more of that. But I think the way to improve our outcomes in state education isn't to penalise the private sector. The way to improve outcomes from the state sector is to invest in our schools fairly. I recently did a survey of some of my schools and asked them whether they'd made any cuts in the last year and whether they anticipated making any cuts in the next 12 months. And almost right across the board, they reported back to me that they've had to cut teaching assistants. They've had to cut other teaching and support staff. They've had to cut back on extracurricular activities and trips. And they're expecting to do the same in the next 12 months. And this is a real problem because the government has just said to schools that you can have a pay rise for teachers, but you're going to have to pay for it out of your existing budgets. And it's not being fully funded. And so what we keep seeing is that the budgets of our state schools keeps getting shrunk, and the outcomes get worse and worse. So the way to tackle that is to invest in our state schools and to bring the standard up overall.
That's nothing to do with the question that he asked. You've been very straight in your answers so far. He wants to know what your policy is on the charitable status for private schools.
Well, I don't think that the charitable status of private schools should be removed, and that's what I was trying to...
Because Labour do.
Sure, Labour do, and I'm a Liberal Democrat, and I'm saying I don't think it should be. But what I do say is that I know that there are many really good examples of where private schools use their facilities and share their facilities with state schools so as to sort of share the gains, as it were, in terms of the fantastic facilities that private schools often have. And I think that's something that we could certainly encourage.
Great. Peter, thank you very much. Text here, would the Lib Dems abolish the monarchy?
No, I don't think so. There are many views within every political party about the monarchy, and there are Liberal Democrats who absolutely love the monarchy, and there are Liberal Democrats who are less keen. So no, that's certainly not something on our agenda.
And Sandra says, university loans are burdening students with huge debts and not keeping up with inflation. What should the Liberal policy on supporting students who should be at the forefront of driving growth be?
Yeah, it's a good question. As you know, this is something where our party has history, and I'm sure your listeners are getting at that. I think the key thing is that at the moment, even when people take out a loan, they often don't have to pay it back until they're earning over a certain threshold. But if there are concerns that taking out that loan in the first place is putting people off going into education, that's certainly something that needs to be looked at. I think what we said in our last manifesto in 2019 was that we would review this whole system, because clearly, it's important that some people can go to university to get education, but at the same time, we also want to invest in apprenticeships as well. So there shouldn't be one at the expense of the other.
Richard says, good evening, Iain and Daisy. What is the Lib Dem stance on cannabis? I assume he means on decriminalising or legalising it.
Yeah. So... this is a really good question, because as far as I'm concerned, we need to look at it through a health lens rather than a criminal justice lens. At the moment, we have lots and lots of people who are smoking weed, and the TCH strength of it is so strong now that it's causing some people to have psychiatric problems, to get bouts of schizophrenia. And so there is a real genuine health problem with people having it at the strength that it is. So what we would like to do is we would like to legalise it, to regulate it, to bring the strength down.
Legalise? Decriminalise?
Decriminalise. So
you did say legalise.
Yeah, so decriminalise, and to make sure that if you were going to, for example, introduce a tax on it, you could actually then use that money and take that money out of the hands of criminals and put it into the public purse.
Jane says, what is the Lib Dem policy on transgender rights, particularly trans women? I'm dismayed at the Conservatives' regressive views and Labour's uncommitted stance on this.
So this is a tricky issue, I think, for every political party. But what I would say is that I really regret how the public debate has become so toxic, particularly when we're talking about a very small number of people. What I would say is that we've had the Equality Act in place since 2010. The Equality Act has given protection to transgender people. The Liberal Democrats have supported transgender rights, and we continue to do so. I think it's really important that where public agencies don't have the clarity around how to uphold rules, for example, on single-sex spaces, that the government provides that clarity. What I don't want to see is this to continue as a culture war, as I think it has become for some people. But fundamentally, we're talking about a small number of people who are often incredibly vulnerable, and Liberal Democrats will continue to stand up for their rights. And we don't see their rights in competition with women's rights.
But do you believe in full self-ID? I mean, where people can just, from one moment, just say, from now on, I want to be seen as a woman?
So at the moment, I think it's really important that we simplify the gender recognition certificate process, because there was a cross-party consensus on this a few years ago, that many people find it incredibly intrusive process to get your gender recognised in law if you are transitioning, and that's something that we would support.
OK, final question from Mo in Earlsfield. Hello, Mo.
Good evening.
What would you like to ask?
Bearing in mind that Paddy Ashdown was the commanding officer of the SBS, would the Lib Dems have an interventionist or an isolationist approach to defence?
Burning subject in the local elections, but interesting one nonetheless.
Absolutely. Well, the Liberal Democrats are internationalists. It runs through our blood in terms of the values that we have, many other values that we hold as well. We're environmentalists and pro-business and pro-public sector, but we are internationalists. And I think you always have to take every international situation on its own merits and work out what the best strategy is. But certainly my personal inclination, having worked in international affairs for 10 years, is that the UK should be proud of its position in the world, and we should lean towards being interventionist, because I think we have a strong history of providing leadership on a whole range of issues, particularly under Paddy Ashdown, as Mo has suggested.
Paddy Ashdown was much more pro-Tony Blair's policy on Iraq, and of course the Liberal Democrats are wholly against that. Now, I could interpret your answer as you thinking, well, actually, I wasn't as totally against Iraq as most Liberal Democrats.
No, I was completely and utterly against the war in Iraq. I was completely behind the Liberal Democrats' position on that. What
about James Cleverly's speech last night, the Foreign Secretary, where he said we need to be much more constructive and engaging towards China?
I'm really concerned about that position from the Conservative Party. I think that for too long, this country has been sort of sleepwalking, really, into a situation where we haven't recognised the strength of either Russia or of China. When I was elected in 2019, I took on the Digital Culture, Media and Sport brief within a matter of weeks, and I was very vocal about saying that we shouldn't have Huawei technology, in our 5G network, and it took other parties some time to catch up with that view. I think we have to be very realistic about the threat that China poses. There are many examples around the world of where the UK has used its soft power to effect, where we've managed to build good relationships, even though our values might be different, our interests are often the same. That doesn't appear to be working with China. We know that China will be looking at every single thing that this government says.
I would have thought, as an internationalist, you would welcome better engagement with a country like China.
So as an internationalist, we always want to work with partners around the world where we can to advance human rights, democracy and the rule of law. But in the case of China, China is not a country at the moment that wants to advance democracy and human rights and the rule of law. We've seen that with its actions with the Uyghur Muslims. We've seen that with its actions in Hong Kong. We've seen that with the threats to Taiwan. And therefore, if we can't work with a country towards those values around rule of law and human rights, then we have to take quite a strong stance.
Daisy Cooper, thank you very much for joining us over the last hour. We have Carla Denyer, the co-leader of the Green Party, with us tomorrow, taking calls as well. That will complete our local election phone-ins. Cross-question coming up in 10 minutes' time with Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis, Jackie Smith, former Home Secretary, Alistair Carmichael, Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokesperson, and Jimmy McLaughlin, host of the podcast Jimmy's Jobs. Lines are open now, 0345 6060 973. If you phone now, you've got a good chance of being one of the first 2 or 3 questions. It's 7:51.
New to LBC.
It's Colin Brazier on LBC.
A place to share your stories. Weeknights from 10.
If individuals want to do it, that's all fine. But the state is not acceptable.
Colin Brazier.
You need to have a democratic mandate. If you look at the polls, it's a non-starter.
On your radio.
They're not fascist.
And on Global Player.
We've got to learn to control our language.
This is LBC.